So it was suggested to me that I do a little video cutting up meat and call it something like Sean Cutting Up Meat. So here you go. This is the doe that I shot last night. It's made out of meat, mostly. So I'm going to show you how to cut it up. First, I skinned it all and chilled it last night, so it's nice and cold. I'm going to go along this bone here, hopefully. And what I'm trying to do is split the hindquarters. Every piece of meat goes on a seam. So basically what you do, you follow that seam, whether it be meat on meat, bone on bone, meat on bone. This is actually called an H bone. It's where the rump or hind quarter or hind, depending on what you want to call it. I could use some more light here probably, but anyway, that's where the back leg, to be simple, attaches to the backbone, which attaches to the funny bone or whatever. I don't know the song. I don't really care. I'm here to cut meat, not sing a song. Anyway, the backbone, or the hind leg, is actually attached by a ball and socket joint, which means the hip bone's got a socket, the back leg's got a little round ball about the size of a ping pong ball, probably on a deer. I don't know if you can see that right there. That fits into that socket and rotates around. Not so much anymore on this one, but you get the drift. Anyway, what I'm trying to do is cut this off of here. Just take my time, little cuts. Little cuts saves meat. Take my time, cut it off. And take the bone out. Basically right now I'm just cutting it up, breaking it down into smaller pieces. That's going to be easier to handle. Right here I've got a nice hind quarter. Pretty fatty actually. Usually you get a fatty deer like that, it means you're going to have a cold winter. Right now the does are fattening up just to get through winter, while the bucks are fattening up because pretty soon the rut's going to be on and you're going to have other things on your mind besides eating. So I got that side off. Now I'm just going to work on this side for a minute, and maybe this side will come off. Second side's always a little harder because when you had the weight of the first one, you could use it kind of as leverage, and as you're pulling up, it's pushing down or whatever, and now I don't have that, so I just have to use a little bit different technique. It's actually not coming off too bad. Follow that backbone around. Come around here. And it's off. That's the backbone. Or the hip bone, I guess you would call it. You want to try to keep clean because just nicer to keep clean. It's just disgusting if you don't keep clean. You end up looking like one of the three little pigs from the working in a deli. But we won't bring work into this. So now I'm going to take this piece right here and I'm just going to set it aside. I've got my little table set up down here, and I'm going to take this piece and look at what needs to come off. There's a thin membrane usually, well always, but when it's fresh it's really slimy, kind of, I guess, and after you let it dry a little bit it kind of crusts up and gets a little easier to cut, a little easier to take off. You don't want to go too deep because then you're going to get into the meat. And you know, people complain about if you leave fat on meat, it makes the meat taste gamey. Well, guess what? This ain't beef. This is game. This is wild game. What else would you think wild game should taste like if not gamey? I'm not talking about that strong, I can't eat it. You know, that horrible strong taste doesn't really come from being wild game. That comes from deer that are pushed, deer that are run. You know, you shoot a buck on opening day of the deer season, especially bucks, because their testosterone and adrenaline and all that makes them taste a little gamier. But anyway, you shoot a buck on day one of the opener, early, first light for instance, and he ain't gonna taste bad. He's not gonna know that it's deer season. So you shoot him, take the meat home, eat it. It's pretty good meat. Now, say that you take that shot and you miss him, especially if it's rifle season, because then they're not only getting shots took at them, but they're hearing the different sounds and the hunters, and it's just mass quantities. That's why I like bow season better. Anyway, back to the subject is day 5 of the season, or the last day would be even a better example. You shoot that same buck that would have tasted good. Now he's been worried, he's been running, he's been hiding and hunkering down, and just, he's been building up a lot of adrenaline, and that adrenaline is going to make him taste way stronger, way worse, if you will, for people who aren't big game eaters anyway. That's where that gamey flavor comes from, is when they're run continuously. That's why you're just better shooting early, shooting a calm deer. This right here is so tough that it won't even go through a grinder. Maybe if you froze it, but my grinder's not big enough to handle meat that's frozen solid. So I'll take that, and all this little stuff I'm taking off, I'm just gonna make some ground venison. Then I'll save the bigger stuff for actual cuts and roasts and whatnot. Right now I'm just following this bone. It's the femur bone. You want to hold your knife close. I should have a cutting glove on. I usually do. See, I just poked my finger there. That's what I get. Anyway, you follow that bone around. A sharp knife with a good tip is the key to getting a clean piece of meat. Right now I'm taking the femur bone out, which this particular spot I'm working is the kneecap. bones are not just a simple shape usually. Especially the ball and socket is probably your easiest joint to separate. But you start getting into kneecaps, which have multiple ridges and grooves, and it becomes harder to get your knife in there to work that bone. First time people, it can be a pretty challenging task. But if you know your anatomy, where your grooves go and how to work your knife, you can come off with a pretty clean bone. Take that and clean it up a little bit. It's kind of like whittling. Instead of getting wood shavings off, you're getting meat off. And yeah, some people look at that and think, boy, that's not much meat. But you know, you take 10, 15, 20 of these pieces right here, you got a hamburger. If I really want to clean it up good, take them bones, boil them down. The marrow is one of the best parts of the meat, or of an animal I should say. It's technically not meat. I don't live in a chronic wasting disease area, so I'm not worried about marrow. You're not supposed to eat bone, whatever, if you do live in a chronic wasting disease area. Anyway, now I'm just getting some of these pieces of tendon out. This is nothing. This is no good to anybody for anything. Maybe get stuck in a coyote's tooth. Cleaning this up a little, getting these tendons out. You know, I'd rather bite into a little piece of bone in a hamburger than to go biting a nice juicy burger and you end up with a piece of tendon stuck in your tooth, between your tooth. You know, then that's no good. I just about got her cleaned up here. I could use stew out of this too. It's pretty good stew. This dough is probably 2 years old. Not a big dough. Not a small, though I could tell that she had nursed before. That's what I call clean enough. I'll go take a little bit of this fat off. Every seam on a primal is going to have a piece of fat running through it. Now beef, you want it. It's a little bit different on an animal. I can honestly say I've never seen wild game that had marbling, I guess. That's the correct term for it. Never had marbling like beef does. That's what makes it tender. Okay, now there's a seam right here that goes along it. If it's hanging, usually on hanging beef, because you break beef down like this, you can't really put a hindquarter on a table. Might be a little bit big. Like I just took a half an animal and put it on the table. So I'm going to take the little fat off and take this is actually a piece of the sirloin that I'm taking off. It's a nice tender piece. It's actually your end piece of steak. It's your last piece of steak before you get into the round. This would make excellent stew, but again, my family's not big on venison. My wife, the thought of it, she loves the flavor, just not the thought. So I will take this and I will make burger out of it, and then I will probably end up either making summer sausage or some nice venison jerky. Now I'm going to go back here. This is the knee joint that I took off. If the animal's hanging, it's a lot easier, but I'm going to show you a pretty simple way to take the sirloin tip off. Very nice roast. Get in under this knee joint, because there's gonna, or knee bone, kneecap I guess. There's gonna be a little piece that points down right here. So you kind of want to get around that. Then if you see this seam here, get your knife in there. My knife's getting dull. Get your knife in there, you can work it with your thumb. This side will be easier actually, because I'll roll it right off of there. What I'm trying to do, I'm trying to follow the seam and get back down to that bone. And there's the bone. Now I'm going to follow it around because the other side is also going to have a seam. If I come out on that seam, which is right there, you can't see it, but I can, so ha ha, you're not cutting it up. Anyway, I'll just peel it right out. Peel it out and leave that skin there, because then I don't have to individually take it off. It's all about the leverage thing again. If I can cut a piece of meat off of the bone and leave as much scrap on that bigger piece, it makes it easier, because now this I have to pick up and flip around, and I've got nothing more than the sharpness of the knife to do my separating, my trimming, whereas if it's still on a big piece, I've got the weight of the meat holding down, pulling against the force of meat pulling up. Now this is just going to have a few little scraps on it that I want to take off. Once again, seams. It's all about the seams. A little bit of scrap there. And here you have a nice, clean sirloin tip. Just a little bit here. Oh, maybe we'll take that little piece off. There's a nice sirloin tip. Nice little roast. That's probably 1 3/4, 2 pounds. They're not a big piece of meat. Well, on a cow it is. I mean, it's, you figure a cow, good sized butcher cow that you get in the store, a sirloin tip's going to be 8 to 10 pounds maybe. So anyway, back to what's left of my hindquarter. Here you got more of the sirloin. I'll take that off. Take it off at the joint, and if you can see this, it's a very pronounced seam. I mean, it just peels right out of there. I could do this without using a knife. It's that much of a seam, that pronounced. Take that and trim off these little pieces of fat. This would make a nice roast. Sirloin is a good steak. It's a little not as popular among the people at home because they go for the ribeyes and whatnot, but a lot of the restaurants will cook sirloins. It's cheaper. Nice lean piece of meat. Might leave that one whole because I might make some stew. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to take this piece of femur bone out. Kneecap on this end, hip bone on this other end. And again, just little cuts and little patience. Let your knife follow the bone around. You know, you don't have to be perfect.